So yesterday, the United States killed 11 Venezuelan traffickers as they were moving drugs across the Caribbean to the United States. And it sounds like this might just be the beginning, at least according to Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, who earlier today said, quote, "This is a deadly serious mission for us, and it won't stop with just this strike." That's according to some reporting by Axios. And we'll get into the details and what's come out in the last 12 to 18 hours, but strangely, that's very little. There's just hardly any new information coming out from the U.S. government about this, which is wild. I mean, we'll run through some news organizations that aren't covering it either, but we're talking about the U.S. military using likely an MQ-9 Reaper drone firing a Hellfire missile into a boat filled with what the U.S. is calling members of Tren de Aragua narco-terrorists trafficking drugs to the United States. That's a big event, no matter how you look at it, and the lack of coverage is pretty surprising. So what we do know at this point is largely coming from an announcement put out yesterday by President Trump, along with this strike footage released by the White House. And this is the bulk of the information we have right now, so it's worth running through line by line, where he said, "On my orders, U.S. military forces conducted a kinetic strike against positively identified Tren de Aragua narco-terrorists in the Southcom area of responsibility. TDA is a designated foreign terror organization operating under the control of Nicolas Maduro, responsible for mass murder, drug trafficking, sex trafficking, and acts of violence and terror across the United States and Western Hemisphere. The strike occurred while the terrorists were at sea in international waters transporting illegal narcotics heading to the United States. The strike resulted in 11 terrorists killed in action." Now, in terms of additional information that's come out from this strike, it's all less than that. I mean, we've got the State Department, DOD, and other accounts essentially just sharing that post made by the president with no additional details. We did have the Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth on Fox News earlier today, where he answered a few questions about this, largely just reiterating what the president said. But nonetheless, given the lack of information, I feel like it's worth listening to his exact words here. Let's give that a watch.
You too. Thanks for your service. The president put that video of him eviscerating, blowing up that boat coming across with all of the drugs on board. And the president said on social, on Truth Social, let them be on notice to anybody bringing drugs to the U.S. Beware. So the president is sending a message to other cartels, right?
A very clear one. I can tell you that was definitely not artificial intelligence. I watched it live. We knew exactly who was in that boat. We knew exactly what they were doing, and we knew exactly who they represented. And that was Tren de Aragua, a narco-terrorist organization designated by the United States, trying to poison our country with illicit drugs. Last year, under the Biden administration, all 4 years, 100,000 Americans died from drug-related from drugs, from the use of drugs, many of which poured in from Central and South America through our southwest border. Now, we're sealing the border, but President Trump is willing to go on offense in ways that others have not been. And to send that clear signal to Tren de Aragua, Cartel del Sols, and others emanating from Venezuela, we're not going to allow this kind of activity. You're poisoning our people. We've got incredible assets, and they are gathering in the region. And so you want to try to traffic drugs? It's a new day. It's a different day. And so those 11 drug traffickers are no longer with us, sending a very clear signal that this is an activity the United States is not going to tolerate in our hemisphere.
Well, Mr. Secretary.
So that AI comment may have seemed like it came out of nowhere, but it actually is a response to the Venezuelan information minister, who put out a statement yesterday following these strikes saying it's AI. Quote, "It seems that Marco Rubio keeps lying to his president. After putting him in a dead end, now he gives him proof, a video with AI, thus proven. What does Gemini say about this video?" And the community note said, essentially, what are you talking about? Nothing has proven this to be AI. I don't know that outside of that one statement, anybody is actually suggesting this is AI, but that's where it came from. And no matter how you feel about it, no doubt this is a major change in how the United States is prosecuting essentially the war on drugs, using the U.S. military lethal assets to eliminate, at distance, traffickers and their product, right? We just haven't really seen that in any time that I can remember. So it's a noticeable change. Now, there's a couple questions that came out of this clip. Again, we're not getting a lot of Q&A about exactly what happened here. President Trump said there were 11 people on this boat. I'll put up a still frame of the shot. It's hard to tell, right? But also hard to see 11 people. It seems like a relatively small boat to have 11 packed into. That said, the only source of information we have on these data points is that statement from President Trump. So maybe he misspoke, or I don't know, but it does the 11 people is raising some questions there. Another question that's been brought up is why not just pull them over? If we were watching this boat and we knew who was there, we had positively identified them, why not just tail them, pull them over, arrest them, and seize the product? And Secretary of State Marco Rubio hit on that a bit here, and this is some reporting from John Hudson over at the Washington Post, where he said Secretary Rubio said that President Trump decided against interdicting the alleged drug boat and chose to destroy the boat to send a message to the drug cartels. Quote, instead of interdicting it on the president's orders, we blew it up and it'll happen again. When asked if the U.S. sent a warning to the boat before it was destroyed, killing everyone on board, Rubio insisted that the vessel, like others carrying drugs, posed a, quote, immediate threat to the United States, providing the right to destroy it. He tried to justify the military action by noting the interdicting drug smugglers doesn't work. He said the business model of drug cartels factors in a 2% loss. Drug seizures won't stop the cartels, Rubio said, quote, what will stop them is if you blow them up. I can see that. I mean, it's definitely, again, a change in operations, no doubt. That is something that we are seeing some pushback on right now. And I've seen some of the speculation and the concern that how do we actually know these were members of Tren de Aragua? How do we actually know that this boat was trafficking drugs? Look, technically, we haven't seen anything to suggest that what the U.S. government is saying here is incorrect. So we have what you're seeing in this video is the extent of the information we have about this strike. So there's nothing beyond just speculation that this could have been fishermen or something like that. I have seen a few folks weigh in talking about how the type of boat and kind of the way that it's outfit is pretty unique to what traffickers use. That said, we've gotten targeting wrong before. In the best of circumstances, with the best of intentions, as good of intentions as you can have when you're trying to kill somebody on the battlefield, we have gotten that wrong. We are not perfect. So if we do get more information here, hopefully it is confirming that this was a good strike against bad people. So now we have Secretary Hegseth and Secretary Rubio kind of suggesting that this is sending a signal and we might do more. And the reason that might do more is a credible threat is because the volume of resources that we have currently deployed in the Caribbean. Again, pulling up a chart here from Ian Ellis over on X that's been tracking this day by day. We've got at least one submarine, 4 guided missile destroyers, couple hundred Tomahawk land attack missiles that could go after targets, cartel targets, or Tren de Aragua targets inside of Venezuelan territory. We've got countless aircraft, clearly some what appear to be MQ-9 Reaper drones overhead capable of carrying out lethal strikes like the one we saw yesterday. The Iwo Jima Amphibious Ready Group with around 2,200 Marines, 800 of whom are capable of moving ashore in a landing party. There's a lot there. We got a lot down there off the coast of Venezuela to facilitate this sort of strike going forward. In fact, Secretary Hegseth kind of hit on that. He was asked this question. China is kind of chiming in saying, we don't like this. We need you guys to leave Venezuela alone. And Secretary Hegseth said, you know who should be concerned here, if anyone, is Nicolas Maduro. Let's give that a watch.
Leader Maduro, who we put a $50 million bounty on his head, has called out to China for help in this. And China's condemning the U.S. And saying, I shouldn't use the word condemn. They're warning us we should look out for the different countries' integrity. Are you worried about China and their relationship with Venezuela, and how will that affect our policy?
No, the only person that should be worried is Nicolas Maduro, who's running effectively as a kingpin of a narco state, not actually elected and indicted for $50 million by the United States. And we know he's involved in the types of drug running that has affected the American people directly. So China and other countries are going to say certain things, and that's their prerogative. What we have there in the Caribbean is a clear demonstration of military might. President Trump has shown, whether it's the southwest border, whether it's the Houthis in freedom of navigation, whether it's Midnight Hammer in Iran, that the precise application of American power can have incredible impacts and reshape dynamics around the world and in the region. So Nicolas Maduro, as he considers whether or not he wants to continue to be a narco trafficker, has some decisions to make. And that's all I'll say about that.
So I don't know if the term indicted for $50 million is like the correct use there. Nicolas Maduro has a recently increased bounty or reward issued by the U.S. Department of Justice, $50 million for any information leading to his arrest. So, hey, if you got any ideas, there's just, throw it out there. Add it to the channel. Throw it in the comments below. Maybe we'll team up on this thing, right? But I did want to play that as well to show just how Secretary Hegseth and the United States government writ large is kind of portraying Maduro right now. Over and again, it's not the democratically elected president of Venezuela. Look, a lot of issues there, and there's a lot of countries around the world that do not view him as the legitimate president, saying that he did interfere in and steal the most recent election. But we're referring to him as a narco-terrorist and kingpin, kind of setting the stage for the continued use of military force, in my opinion. And sticking with that personal opinion piece here, we're going to get into the legality of all of this. And this is an area where I personally struggle, because we have been very broad in our application of military force around the world since 2001. And a lot of times, not every time, but a lot of times, I think that is the correct use of military force. When we go after a terrorist, a member of Al-Qaeda or Islamic State, and we kill him maybe in Africa or Yemen or Afghanistan or Pakistan, wherever it might be, yes, the president is not going through Congress to get those authorizations to carry that out. In some cases, it's been stretched a little bit more than maybe what Congress originally intended, but I personally have a hard time pushing back on that because I like where it ends up. I recognize the flaw in that thinking, because there very well could be a time where the strike is carried out in a manner that I don't agree with, and I don't really have any legs to stand on. So it's worth addressing the legal aspect here as well, even though from what I'm seeing, a lot of people are very much in support. A lot of Americans are very much in support of the elimination of members of a terrorist group that are funneling drugs into the United States. And why would that not be a popular view? However, I don't think this is going to get a lot of attention, because if we just look, or a lot of debate really at all. I mean, this was less than 24 hours ago. And if you look through some of the major U.S. news outlets, and I just typed into Google, what are the 3 largest news outlets in the United States? So who knows? Maybe these are wrong. But we've got the New York Times here talking about, Korean tattoos or something. The Wall Street, nothing on that page about military action being taken in the Western Hemisphere. We've got the Wall Street Journal talking about what we know about America's billionaires, and NBC talking about why we shouldn't take our smartphones to the bathroom. And I think on 2 of these, if you scroll further down, there's like a subsection talking about what may have happened here. I'm not trying to insinuate that we're on the verge of some regional war, not by a long shot, but this is a very serious conversation, whether or not we have the legal justification to carry out this sort of strike. And we'll get into some thoughts here in a second of people saying absolutely not, and this is setting a bad precedent. I'm just concerned that however we feel about it, that debate is not happening now, and it doesn't look like it's getting ready to happen anytime soon. So turning to some pushback here, the BBC penned an article talking about the legality of the strike, where they quote a few professionals or researchers around the world. Professor Luke Moffat of Queen's University Belfast said, quote, "Force can be used to stop a boat, but generally this should be in non-lethal measures." He added that the use of aggressive tactics must be, quote, "reasonable and necessary in self-defense where there is immediate threat of serious injury or loss of life to enforcement officials," noting that U.S. moves were likely unlawful under the law of the sea. And they do note here that the United States is not a signatory to the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, but the U.S. military's legal advisors have previously said that the U.S. should, quote, "act in a manner consistent with its provisions." Professor Michael Becker of Trinity College Dublin went a step further, saying, quote, "The fact that U.S. officials describe the individuals killed by the U.S. strike as narco-terrorists does not transform them into lawful military targets. The U.S. is not engaged in an armed conflict with Venezuela or the Tren de Aragua criminal organization. Not only does the strike appear to have violated the prohibition on the use of force, it also runs afoul of the right to life under international human rights law." He said that the use of force in this case could amount to extrajudicial arbitrary killing and a fundamental violation of human rights, saying, quote, "Labeling everyone a terrorist does not make them a lawful target and enables states to sidestep international law." That last part is where I have an uneasy feeling. Again, recognizing the hypocrisy of, in certain cases, I think it's okay and the right move, but at the same time that we should talk about it and maybe have more discussion about this. When we start labeling somebody a terrorist and all of a sudden they are legally justified to be on the receiving end of a hellfire strike, I just feel like that probably requires more thought. And the further we go without getting into those details, the probably less likely we are to really clearly define it going forward. But either way, that's about where everything sits right now. Again, not very much in terms of updates from the U.S. government. We'll continue to track this as best we can. I should mention that we also just a couple of days ago stood up our Patreon program, ad-free, sponsor-free videos, AMA sessions with the patrons, and then, of course, some patron-only videos. That'll be linked in the description below for those interested. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.